Over the PA system comes the announcement, Colonel Tillman, pick up a beige phone. A beige phone, highly classified conversation. That's my signal from the radio operator that something significant is going on in the world. When I pick up the phone, the radio operator lets me know that we're executing plan such and such, which is the relocation of the President of the United States. Highly classified, has never been done, but something has gone wrong in the country. It's now the only time we're going to do it is under time of a war or time of attack.
Welcome to the Beyond Speaking podcast from Premier Speakers Bureau, featuring in-depth conversations with the world's most in-demand keynote speakers.
This week, we're excited to have on Colonel Mark Tillman. Today, he shares his untold story of flying the president on 9/11, deciphering information in the fog of war, and bringing the commander-in-chief to ground zero. Chosen as the nation's 12th presidential pilot, Colonel Mark Tillman served as pilot and commander of Air Force One from 2001 to 2009. Colonel Tillman was at the command controls of Air Force One through numerous national events, most notably on September 11th, 2001, where he kept the president out of harm's way and connected the Flying Oval Office to first responders on the ground. Colonel Mark Tillman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Brian. I'm glad to tell the story, especially on September 11th. It's truly an honor.
Well, we're so glad to have you. I know you've been one of our favorite speakers for so long, and I know that our attendees, we will be having some Q&A at the end, but we want to go ahead and invite you to start with your presentation, and we'll do some questions after.
Sounds great. As everyone knows, on September 10th, 2001, President Bush started an education visit to the state of Florida. First stop was Jacksonville, Florida. He met with the school teachers, and then we repositioned the plane over to Sarasota, Florida. And the crew spent the night while President Bush got some needed rest. Then the next morning, the plan was for him to go to a local elementary school and talk with the students. You all may remember the basically no child left behind motto of the president and the administration. On the morning of September 11th, no one knew what was about to happen. Many of the media said the president had to have known about it, but actually he did not. None of us knew about it. The 747 sits at rest on the Sarasota tarmac, and before you can cut across the cones that are in front of the aircraft, you get permission from my top cop, a guy named Will Chandler. Big Will is what we call him. He's about 6'4", about 250 pounds, just an enormous man that took care of business. So on September 11th, as I walked across those cones, Big Will came up, saluted me, and did as he always does. He lets me know that the plane is completely secure. There were no incidents the night prior, and the plane was ready to go security-wise, and they were ready to make a move. Once again, there was no knowledge of anything going on the East Coast at this point, of people hijacking aircraft, etc. No one knew anything about it. Now, as we continued on, I do what I always do, and I start from the nose of the aircraft, and I go to the tail of the aircraft. And I'm not inspecting the aircraft. I just want to make sure that everybody on the aircraft, all the flight attendants, flight engineers, crew chiefs, understand that I am truly honored to be on the aircraft. The plane is always immaculate, and I want to thank them for a job well done. So I go room to room and take a look at it. On September 11th, on the morning, as I left the president's quarters, I moved into the president's office. Over the PA system came the announcement, Colonel Tillman, pick up a white phone. Now, there's white phones and beige phones on the aircraft. White phones, normal communication. Beige phones, classified communication. I pick up a white phone in the president's office. The radio operator upstairs lets me know, Colonel Tillman, you need to come upstairs immediately and see what's going on. As I go running upstairs, the radio operator shows me the first pictures of the first aircraft that's hit the tower in New York City. Now, Air Force One at this point only had kind of the old tuners of the old days, the rabbit ears. We didn't have basically direct TV, digital TV being sent to the plane. So we were monitoring ABC, CBS, NBC. So the pictures you see are from the Today Show. Now, all the commentators on the Today Show are saying that an aircraft has hit one of the towers in New York City. At the same time, we're getting information from our command and control saying that it is a simple aircraft accident. They said it was a light plane that hit the tower. All of us, after looking at the pictures, knew it wasn't a light plane. It had to be a large aircraft to leave that kind of damage on the tower. Now, we continue with our command and control. There is no concerns about it. All we know is that we're going to probably have to go to New York City the next day because there's been obvious loss of life. So I let the crew know to plan a trip, and then I head back downstairs. Once I get back downstairs, as I continue on the small tour that I'm doing of the aircraft, when I get into the conference room, over the PA system comes the announcement, Colonel Tillman, pick up a beige phone. A beige phone, highly classified conversation. That's my signal from the radio operator that something significant is going on in the world. When I pick up the phone, the radio operator lets me know that we're executing plan such and such, which is the relocation of the President of the United States. Highly classified, has never been done, but something has gone wrong in the country. It's now, the only time we're going to do it is under time of a war or time of attack. As I go running upstairs, the rest of the crew is starting to rally around to find out what's going on. As I head upstairs, the radio operators show me the second plane hitting the second tower. Now, all the footage we are getting at this time is from the local news stations because they've all gone national, and you can now see what the national feed is. But once again, there's a little simple rabbit ears, small antennas on the aircraft. That's what we're picking up as local news stations there in Sarasota. The crew rallies around. Big Will Chandler asks what's going on. I let him know that we're executing plan such and such. It is not an exercise. This is for real. We are now what appears to be going to war at this point. Everybody starts moving into position. Now, you may remember Andy Card leaning over to the president at the elementary school, and he told the president that the country was under attack. President Bush did as a great leader would do. He sat there and he talked with the students. He didn't alarm the students. The reason being is because across the room from him, Ari Fleischer, his press secretary, was telling him to stay in position because behind him in the next classroom over was everyone that he needed. Ari Fleischer then gave all the information to the president while he's sitting there with the students. But in the next room over, Karl Rove, Dan Bartlett, communications director, the national security representative, they're all in the room getting ready to relocate the president of the United States. President Bush addresses the elementary school students, and then he goes ahead and he leaves the room with the students, and he comes into the room next door. He sits down on a Stu 3, a classified phone, and he talks with the vice president. The vice president's now giving him all the information. At this point, he's being told that he's going to be hunkered down. He's going to be relocated. Now, all the orders that we live by in the military, for the relocation, it should have a big asterisk up top. The asterisk should say, is your president from the state of Texas? If so, jump to the bottom because he's not going to follow the procedure. President Bush was going to have nothing to do with hunkering down and hiding. He was going to get back into the battle. He wanted to go to Washington, D.C. immediately. At that point, I was relayed the orders that we are negative. We are not going to go ahead and bring him into a hiding place in the U.S. to basically, the whole concept of this is the continuity of government. So you've got the vice president underground, you've got the president about to go underground, the speaker of the House needs to be found at this point, SecDef, SecState, everybody now needs to be brought into it, basically for the continuity of government. President Bush was not going to have anything to do with it. The continuity of government was fine. He felt comfortable with Air Force One, and he wanted to be brought back to Washington, D.C. immediately. Now, the FAA is advising everyone on the conference link that we have now, because we're talking to pretty much the boweled agencies, CIA, NSA, FBI. Everybody's giving inputs now, letting us know what is happening. The FAA lets us know that numerous aircraft have been hijacked on the East Coast. The reason they said numerous was because of the fact that some aircraft during a normal day will lose their transponder and not actually talk with the controllers. So any aircraft that had that situation was tagged as being hijacked. They let us know there was an aircraft above us in Florida going into the St. Pete, Tampa area, descending into us coming out of about 30,000 feet. At that point, they assumed we were the target. Now, Air Force One always has a backup aircraft. So I had the backup aircraft start coming in towards us, and my plan was to do a shell game. When the president starts coming towards us, one plane will be on the ground waiting for him. But until he gets to us to be viable, I was going to have the primary take off, the backup come up and land. As I started to do that, the Secret Service said negative. The president's starting to move from the schoolroom. He'll be to us in less than 10 minutes. He's coming at us fast. I stayed in position. We kept monitoring the aircraft above us descending into us. And at this point, all of a sudden, we are told that the Pentagon has been hit by a truck bomb. Now, that is significant for the fog of war, because what's going on now is not only an air attack, but a ground attack is what we're being told. There's car bombs and truck bombs going off in the capital area. That was significant for us, because I now am being told that I'm taking the president back to Washington, D.C., and there's significant warlike, basically adventures going on back there in D.C. Now, as the president's coming to us, we are finally told that the Pentagon was hit with an airliner. The reason they thought it was a truck bomb was because there was no airliner kit, basically parts of airliners outside. We couldn't get a hold of the Secretary of Defense. SecDef was outside looking at the damage outside of the Pentagon. It was a significant communication event that failed for the president that day. We lost communications capability with commercial satellites, but more important, many of the people we needed to get hold of were relying on cell phone usage, and cell phones were saturated at that point. Basically, all the antennas were saturated with all the calls of everybody in Washington, D.C. Now, as the president's heading to us, he's coming to us fast. I make the plan that I'm going to go ahead and start the engines on the right side. And as the president hits the bottom of the steps that are leading him to his entryway, I'll start the other two engines on the left side. The plane has the capability to start all four engines at the same time. As President Bush hits the bottom stairs, I start the engines on the left side. So as he's coming up the stairs, the moment he walks into the aircraft, the door shuts and we're ready to taxi. We did exactly that. Stair truck moves out of the way. As I start taxiing, Secret Service lets us know that an unidentified man is pulled up at the end of the runway with a long gun, what appears to be a long gun. Secret Service at this point now starts moving into position to get to the man at the end of the runway in the van. I make a decision to turn the aircraft around and not take off abeam the gentleman, but to take off over the top of him to make sure that we were not going to be shot at. At this point, I enter the runway, bring the power to full power, and then basically pulled the yoke back into my lap. The plane leaped off the ground in less than half of the distance. I made a big right rollout turn over the Gulf of Mexico and continued the right turn heading towards Washington, D.C. We no sooner had started the turn than we were advised by Jacksonville Center that the aircraft in question that was descending into us, transponder off, assumed to be hijacked, was descending into us. Did we have them in sight? We did have them in sight. We made a decision to make a turn away from them to see if they would follow us, to see if we were the target. At this point, though, the aircraft did not turn and follow us. It stayed its position. Jacksonville Center then comes alive and lets us know that the aircraft in question is now talking with them. Their transponder had failed. They failed to talk to the controller because they were talking to their home, basically their home drone. They're talking to their company, and they were telling them to lock their doors because aircraft were being hijacked. That point, fog of war, safe now. We're heading towards Washington, D.C. As we start heading over Gainesville, the president's down in his quarters talking with the vice president. The vice president's letting them know that now all aircraft have been accounted for that have been hijacked. The only one left now is over the Ohio Valley. It appears to have made its turn and is heading towards Washington, D.C. Fighters are now moving into position. The vice president asked the president for shoot-down authority of the airliner. President authorizes the shoot down as long as the airliner does not follow the directions of the fighters. Now, everything is coming together at this point. We're being told that the passengers aboard the aircraft, as they're coming out of the Ohio Valley, are aware that they've been hijacked. Now we have great hope that they're going to try to do something. All of a sudden, we get word from the FAA that the airliner that is over the Ohio Valley heading towards Washington, D.C. is in a descent. Now the aircraft is completely off radar. All of us, to include the president, thought we had shot down and killed our own people to save countless lives in Washington, D.C. As we continue on, minutes later, which seemed like an eternity, the fighters let us know that negative. They did not shoot down the aircraft. The aircraft was in a descent when they joined up, and the aircraft had crashed into the ground somewhere in Pennsylvania. Now, the president asked the question, does it look like there are any signs of life? The fighters come back after about 1 to 2 minutes, and they said negative. We don't even see any signs of wreckage of the aircraft. All we see is a hole in the ground. Shanksville is where the aircraft crashed. If you haven't been to Shanksville, it's an incredible memorial to true heroes in my mind. The folks that tried to take control of that aircraft, although unsuccessful, they did the American heroic activity that we're all famous for. When times are tough, we take care of business and we get going. That's exactly what they did. They stormed the cockpit. Although they didn't save all on board, they saved countless lives in Washington, D.C. Besides the first responders, the true heroes in my mind were the folks that ended up taking control of that aircraft over Shanksville. Tremendous memorial that you need to visit. Now, as we continue on at this point, the president makes the decision that we're not going to head back to Washington, D.C. We're going to go ahead and turn. We're going to wait until we find out exactly what's going on in Washington. Countless activities in Washington. We're being told there's numerous people unidentified around the White House, that there's people around Andrews Air Force Base. So we kind of loitered until we could find out exactly what's going on so we could bring the president home. At the same time, the vice president lets us know that all of the areas that are near for the president that are basically coming under concerns of coming under attack, they've all been secured. But at the same time, the president wants to address the American people. We did not have that capability on Air Force One. He could talk to everybody in the world. We just didn't have the ability to stream video. No sooner did we start to make a decision to land so we could talk to the American public, all of a sudden we get word from Houston Center as we're heading over northern Florida. Houston Center comes up on the frequency. Air Force One, you have fast movers at your 7 o'clock, less than 100 miles. Now, 7 o'clock off to our low left. We ask, who are they? They say, we don't know. They're fast movers. They're coming up on you very fast. How fast? They're supersonic. They're coming up on you now. We have no idea who these folks are. All of a sudden, as we're trucking in, we get at this radio call, Air Force One, this Cowrie 45. We're a flight of 2 F-16s. We are your cover. The coolest thing ever occurred. The President's Guard unit out of Houston, Ellington, their commander got tired of us sitting, being unprotected in the air. So he launched his alert fighters out of Houston to come join up on us. He couldn't have written history any better for the President's Guard unit to come protect the boss. They joined up on us, F-16 on each wing. We were ready to go. We were ready to make things happen at this point. The president makes the decision to go into Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. And he addresses the American public once we get there on the ground. Now, the president's working his media talk with the American public. At the same time, I'm filling the airplane up with gas. We're coming up with a decoy operation. Next stop was going to be off at Air Force Base in Nebraska. Put the president deep underground until we can find out exactly what's safe back in the United States. The president comes running to us, jumps on board the aircraft. We then take him to Offutt Air Force Base, put him deep underground. No sooner did we get there, though, that the president, the true Texan in him, came out again. He, instead of staying there for 15 to 16 hours, a couple hours later, he came running back to the aircraft, came up top, gave me the famous Texas attention-getting step of drilling me in the chest. Tillman, it's time to get home. At that point, we loaded everybody up. We came home as fast as the aircraft would travel. Going across the Midwest, fighters are joining up on us from all the major cities. And as we're coming in towards Washington, D.C., coming over the Shenandoah Valley, we had F-15s join up on us from Langley Air Force Base. We had the President's Guard unit, F-16s, underneath us the entire time, joining up on us. They were going to lead us into Washington, D.C. Nothing more fitting than having the President's Guard unit protecting Air Force One and the boss as we're coming into land. The plan was to have the F-16s come in. They've got the ability to shoot chaff and flares in case anybody fires a rocket at us or whatever. They can go ahead and take the hit. Air Force One is entirely capable of any kind of self-defense, so we had no worries, but it was great to have the fighters leading us in. So right now, to recap, F-15s on our wing, F-16s underneath us leading in, and then all of a sudden we had F-16s from Andrews Air Force Base coming at us off the nose. We then put the F-15s high on us, put the F-16s on the wing. And I'll show you a picture of the F-16s. The F-16s on the wing should have been, if my hand is basically the plane and my thumb the wing, the F-16 should have been on the outside of my thumb, the wing. Well, what the F-16 did was he asked to come in on a close wing, so he came inside the wing. Now, the president is looking outside the windows, and he sees the F-16, and the fighter pilot's just giving him a big thumbs up, letting the boss know that he's ready to go, ready to make things happen. As we descended into Washington, D.C., we could see the damage at this point. The Pentagon was smoldering. We came over the top of that. We then rolled out on final, landed. The president went ahead and joined. Was then picked up by Marine One. The Marines took him on a low level, on a different route, because we were told there were numerous threats waiting for us in Washington, D.C. The Marines then brought him back to the White House. You may remember, the president addressed the nation that evening about what occurred on September 11th. Now, 2 days later, we brought the president up to ground zero. It was one of the most eeriest flights I've ever taken in my life. Nobody talking whatsoever. We were the only plane in the sky. We flew up to Manhattan, clear in a million day. I descended over the city, rolled around basically ground zero. You could see it still smoldering. You could see everybody on the ground. We then brought the president to McGuire Air Force Base, and then he helicoptered into the Wall Street landing zone. When he got to the landing zone, and then he moved towards ground zero, when he was on ground zero, he was talking with the first responders. Standing on the rubble of a fire truck, all the first responders are yelling to him, George, George, you know, get him, George. And then some guy yells out, we can't hear you. Then the president responded to him. I've got the video of it. I'll play the video now so you can hear the president's response.
I want you all to know. Almost that, man. That America today is on mended faith in prayer for the people whose lives were lost here, for the workers who work here, for the families who mourn. This nation stands with the good people of New York City, on New Jersey, and Connecticut, as we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens. I can hear you. I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And people, and the people who knock these buildings down will hit all of us soon.
After the president talked with the first responders and they're all yelling USA, USA, that's what America was about at this point. You'll probably all remember what's after September 11th, how the country came together. USA, USA was an incredible sight and voice to hear everywhere we went. When the flag came back up on ground zero, survived the attack, that's what America's about. I have this picture on my desk. It's signed by President Bush. It says, never forget President George W. Bush. Now, after September 11th, the World Series was going on. The president, as you know, big baseball fan. There was the Yankees playing the Arizona Diamondbacks. The first two games were in Arizona. The third game was in New York. The president's plan was to throw out the first pitch when they came back to New York. The president practiced all the time. An amazing athlete to begin with. But on the day that we brought him up to New York, it was the most hilarious sight ever. The reason being is because the president had to wear a second chance vest, a bulletproof vest, because there were still numerous threats in basically Yankee Stadium. So when we brought the president up the East Coast and we're heading towards New York City, the president's downstairs throwing the ball with some of the staff and warming up on the way there. Flight attendants are calling us upstairs, and we each took turns to go downstairs to see him throw the ball on the aircraft. It was incredible. But that's truly what a great leader he was. He wanted to make sure it was perfect. And the pitch, as you can see, the first pitch that he threw was a strike, a perfect strike. But more important is what you saw the crowd doing. As soon as the president finished the pitch, everyone's chanting, USA, USA. That's what America's about. America stands strong. You should have no fear about what your fellow Americans can do day after day. It was obvious after September 11th that we came together as a country, and we'll continue to do that no matter what happens in the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so proud to have served the United States of America, and thank you for all your support. God bless America.
Well, thank you, Colonel Tillman. That is an amazing story, and thank you for sharing that. Thank you for your service, too, as well. That is truly amazing.
Thank you.
And we do have some questions here from some different people. So I'll jump into those here. The first is from Mary McGee with Deloitte. When you revisit 9/11 and your thoughts, what comes to mind about your role? What would you have done differently? And do you get a knot in your stomach thinking about how things may have turned out differently?
You know, we were all trained for any kind of attack against the United States. Obviously, if the president's on Air Force One, that's his escape platform. And we were all trained for that. So we executed the training that we did. Our challenge was that the attack wasn't coming from outside the United States. It was coming from inside the United States. So we had no idea what was going to happen. Ideally, if I could have, I'd have brought the president back to Washington, D.C. immediately. In hindsight, that would have been the perfect place for him to go and be safe in the Washington, D.C. area. But we had no idea what was waiting for us in D.C. So it was good that we did what we did. But, you know, I have no regrets for anything that I did. The crew and the United States military reacted to this situation perfectly. Everybody did everything they were trained to do. And that's all you can ask from everybody. You relied on your training. The president not only had great communications, he was well protected. And everywhere he went, between Barksdale and Offutt Air Force Base, the military reacted to it within minutes because they had no advanced knowledge of us landing. They took care of business. And that's what you can expect from your United States military.
And so next question is, so to set it up a bit, you were the chief pilot for George W. Bush, but you were part of Air Force One and flew under George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton as well. So so this question from Bill Lee of the Lee Company. This is the one in Connecticut. For those, we're in Tennessee. So we have Bill Lee of the Lee Company, who's now governor of Tennessee. This is Bill Lee of the Lee Company in Connecticut. Do different presidents treat crews differently? How do their leadership styles differ? And have you heard any rumors about how the presidents, the last two presidents, work with their Air Force One crews?
You know, first of all, what happens on Air Force One stays on Air Force One. But no, I have no concerns about the President of the United States. President H.W. Bush, amazing man. I flew as a co-pilot under President H.W. Bush. President Clinton as a co-pilot. Then I flew in command quite a few times. But all the presidents they're presidents. They're absolutely taking care of the people. They take care of the crew. Some of the staff are a challenge to work with, depending on what the staff's background is. But everybody's under high pressure. So you've got to make sure that you not only take care of the safety of the president, but you've got to make sure that you take care of the staff as well, because it's a flying White House. They have to do business the whole time. I honestly have no recollection of anything bad about any of the presidents. None of us would ever call up the current presidential pilot and ask him what's it like flying President Trump, because you just don't ever ask that kind of question. That's nothing. We know it's truly an honor to serve the President of the United States, and flying President Trump is just as big an honor as flying President George W. Bush. I mean, they are, in my mind, they're the commander-in-chief. They're the President of the United States, and truly honored to be part of that group of folks.
So was that like your long-term goal, is to become the pilot of chief pilot of Air Force One, or how did that happen?
No, not at all. I applied to the VIP unit there in Washington, D.C., and basically started with flying senators, congressmen, the vice president, first lady, and just happened to be lucky enough to be introduced to one of the Air Force One pilots. They liked the way I flew, and then I started the process of working my way up in Air Force One. There's only 8 pilots at Air Force One, so to ever think that you'd be selected to fly Air Force One is, that's just a pipe dream. So I was truly honored and blessed to get to Air Force One, and to this day, it's just one of those things you just can't plan for. But if anybody ever asked me, it's the people that I got to fly with. It wasn't so much anything I did. It's the fact that if you could join any organization where you knew everybody around you was the best of the best, that makes a day perfect when everybody's whistling and singing coming to work. It's no challenge to lead 300 of those kind of people when they're pumping you up every day. So I was truly blessed to have that position.
So this next question is from Cosmo Mazza of BAE Systems. Have you ever had issues with backseat driving from former astronauts?
It's funny you say that. We took John Glenn and Neil Armstrong to after the shuttle disaster in Texas. We took them to the funeral, the memorial service in Houston. So before we took off, I told the flight attendants that if by any chance any of these 2 gentlemen and their families want to come to the cockpit, by all means, they could even have my seat if they want. And sure enough, after they got on board, both of them asked to come to the cockpit. So from takeoff to landing in Houston, John Glenn sat beside me. Neil Armstrong was to the right of me in the engineer seat. And the two gentlemen were talking about what it was like, flying, being part of the NASA, and that those things are just, you can only dream about, to have two aviation legends sitting right behind you. Now, everybody jokes about it because when I went into Houston Ellington to make up time, or basically lose time because we were getting a little ahead, I intentionally overshot final, and John Glenn reached up and put his hands on my shoulders and goes, Sonny, the airport's right there. So yeah, I got everybody joking, telling me it took John Glenn to show me where Houston Ellington was at. So that's totally fine with me. Anytime John Glenn wants to grab my shoulders and school me, I'm fine with that.
All right. So one last question here. Actually, this is another one for Mary McGee with Deloitte. What is the most important thing to teach our children about 9/11?
It's great you're saying that, because tonight I'm talking with my niece, and she's gonna tell me what 9/11 means to her, and then she's gonna record our conversation and present it to her 5th grade class. So now I've thought about I've talked to elementary school students before, and none of them have ever, they didn't live during that period, so they're not familiar with it. They're not familiar, nor do I want them to know about the number of deaths that occurred or whatever. I just want them to know that, America stands strong, and when there's natural disasters, or if there's any incidents against America, you need to know that all the Americans, you and all the other kids in your class and your moms and dads, we all come together and we take care of it. We not only take care of the country, we take care of each other. During these times of COVID, it's the same thing. We all need to take care of each other, follow the rules. And that's what I'm going to tell her tonight, and the rest of her students, is that the big lesson learned out of 9/11 was, they may have caught us with our pants down at one point, but we rallied, we came together, and America stood strong. And to this day, we still stand strong, and we're ready to defend the United States of America against anybody. But more important, we came together as a nation, and we will continue to do that. And we take care of each other, because that's what America's about.
Colonel Tillman, thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for the service to our country. And thanks for joining us for this free Virtual Friday event.
Thanks so much for having me. It's truly an honor to see you again, Brian. And to everybody that's listening, thanks so much, and God bless America.
Thank you for joining us for the Beyond Speaking podcast. To learn more about today's guest, visit premierspeakers.com. Make sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen.